Hey, this is Sarah Pritchard, confidence coach for women. How are you doing? So I am excited and I'm happy to finally be on here after having so much to do today. I'm happy to share on this topic because it has just been really resonating with me. Hey, Cheryl. It has really been resonating with me, which is all about breaking unhealthy patterns and cycles that we oftentimes either find ourselves in unconsciously from a generational standpoint, or that we even bring on ourselves, right? So it can come from a variety of different places and spaces, but ultimately it can impact our lives in both positive ways, but also in both negative ways. Okay. So for anyone who is joining that is new or who is catching this replay, I'm Tara Pritchett. I'm a confidence coach for women. I absolutely love working with single professional women who feel like they're at a space and place in their lives where they're ready to heal, evolve, and grow because they feel as though that it is the time now more than ever to manifest the life and love that they desire. You can find me all over on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook at Unleash Your Fierce. And again, today our topic is all about breaking unhealthy patterns and unhealthy cycles. So this topic came up about a week ago because I have a new client that I got when we did our last challenge. And as we talked for the first time, I asked her, and once she kind of shared her story, I said, okay, now tell me about your mom and your dad and tell me about their relationship. Then tell me about them individually. And what we were able to pinpoint was that what she was experiencing in her own relationships, the chaos, the craziness, the abuse, even down to how, the men that she was attracting and even having children with, how it was lining up to her father and then how she lined up to how her mother was, right? So she didn't even recognize just how deep it ran, just how deep that particular cycle, right, or that particular pattern. Like I said, there are ones that can come to us unconsciously from family, but then there are also some we create on our own, just based on our experiences, based on things that we see, and based on the belief system that we have, right? So anyway, we came to the realization that she had unconsciously fell into the pattern, and it had kind of dinged her over and over and over again, and she knew that she needed to move forward because she has the physical manifestations right in front of her face, right? Of how it was showing up day in and day out, from the men she was attracting, to the men that will become the father of her children. They all were mirroring the same pattern over and over again, right? So that was the first thing that got me into this topic. The second thing was a part of us working together was me creating a custom, audio for her that would help her break free of this particular pattern. And when I recorded it, I didn't realize how powerful it was. And I was like, oh my God, I know I'm making this for you. But in the back of my head, I'm like, every woman needs this, right? So it was just that powerful as I was speaking the words, and I kind of put it all together for her. I'm like, wow, breaking the chains that bond us, right, from the cycles and patterns that we find ourselves in is such an important thing. And it's a topic that has been on my mind for months. And I feel like it's just something really important to talk about. And before I get into, telling you how you can begin the process of breaking free of clutter and confusion, chaos, childhood wounds that you might still carry, trying to compare yourself to other women, discontentment, right? If you're tired of, waiting to get married, or you're tired of waiting for a relationship and you find yourself, in a cycle or pattern of, you might date for a little bit, then you get frustrated, then you stop, then you go back out, you do it again, then you stop because you get frustrated again. That can also be considered a pattern, right? Your pattern might not necessarily be from your parents or your upbringing. It might be from something you're actually doing, in the moment that is bringing about a certain pattern. And I'm going to teach you how you can begin the process. Hey, April, how you can begin the process of breaking free of that pattern, right? So again, that's the first way I got into the whole pattern thing. was from my client. And when we pinpointed again how her parents' relationship mirrored the relationships that she was attracting to her life, despite again her being this single, beautiful, professional woman who is doing her thing, but then on the layers underneath, right, or what is attracting certain things to her that she didn't even realize. And then the second thing was, last night I was watching Ayanna Fix My Life. I was like, let me go ahead and catch up because Ayanna's my girl. I know everybody's not down for Ayanna, but personally, I don't care because that's your own personal issue that has nothing to do with me. But what I will say is that whatever I watched yesterday was, it was amazing. There were 7 brothers. Actually, there were 6 because one actually was murdered. But there were 7 brothers, right, who came onto the show. Not sure if you caught this episode. Not sure if you watch it. If you don't watch it, I'm not really sure what you're doing, right? Because the level of healing, evolving, and growing that goes on is phenomenal. And anybody can apply the tools and the techniques to their own life, or you can really see how your own ish plays out, when you're watching other people go through the process. So I will say 70% of the time as I watched the show, I had tissues out and I was in tears, just because it was these 7 boys. Again, one was murdered. And they both had their mom and dad. They had the same exact parents for all 7, which is, I feel like, kind of rare. But the mom ended up leaving them and abandoning them. And then the kids ended up in foster care, right? And just the things that have happened to them. And you can just feel the pain. You can feel the anger. The parents, obviously, they were like on drugs. And one of the oldest, because the mom still did drugs when she had the first, all of them, but because she was on drugs, I guess the most with the first one, he unfortunately, well, not necessarily unfortunately, but it's unfortunate in the way that it happened, now has obviously a mental health challenges, right? But nobody knows what they are, right? Because all of the kids ended up in foster care. And one of the youngest ones wrote to Ayanna and said he wants to change this, right? Because he's struggling with his sexuality. His family has been kind of torn apart because they were into, the foster care system, and there's just no pieces together, right? So they recognize and realize the cycles and the patterns of which they are in. And Ayanna basically helped them kind of untangle it and because it's all kind of tangled up. Then when they brought the dad in, the dad basically said, well, my dad wasn't there for me either, right? So again, it's like they're perpetuating the cycle. And then one of the oldest brothers, he has 4 children, and he basically admitted he's perpetuating the same cycle, right? So we don't even realize, as I mentioned at the start, unconsciously fall into the patterns. And I remember the first time I recognized I fell into a pattern was when I was in college. And I had a bootleg relationship, and I had a very unhealthy situation. And when it occurred, the first thing I thought was, why me, right? Why does it happen to me? Like, I'm smart, I'm pretty, I'm in college, I'm doing my thing. Like, I don't really have drama. I don't really have issues. But the more that I dug deeper and I started asking my mom questions about, her relationship with my dad, about my dad, and this how he was and how is he with women. And then I also asked my partner, who was doing the most. I started to think about his family, and his dad definitely was doing the most. And when I put 2 and 2 together, I realized we have fell into the pattern, right? We have fell into the pattern, right? So when he told me that he had, fathered a child outside of our relationship, it only just mirrored what had already occurred generations before us, right? If we look to his dad, he had all these kids outside of the relationship with his mom. And then if I went to my own dad, he allegedly, I guess, had some kid. I don't know. But then if we go back to my dad's dad, he had a whole family across town. He had a whole family in another state, but he had maybe 6 or 7 children. I should know this, right? But he had a wife. at home, but he had another family across town, another out of state. So what did we do as teenagers, right? Well, we weren't, I guess, well, college. What did we do? We fell into the pattern. We fell into the cycle, but we didn't know that. We were just being ourselves and doing our thing. And then when we got to that point where we had to have, that honest conversation that something had obviously broken that relationship up in a way. Me, you already know me. I gotta be deep and on a whole nother level. I wanted to know, like, well, why is this happening to me? And that's when I first started to learn that I had to learn not why is it happening to me, but what do I need to learn from this experience? And that's why I began the process of really kind of unpacking what was there. And that's when I started to realize, I literally sat down and started writing it out. I kind of drew like a little map, and I was like, okay, so my dad, then my dad's dad, then his dad and his dad. So I was like, oh, hell no. Right. So I'm glad that I came to that realization, very early in life, before marrying that person and having kids and just continuing the cycle over and over and over again. Right. So luckily, I guess for me, I caught it in that particular situation. But that's what I mean when I'm talking about breaking unhealthy cycles and patterns. But a lot of times we don't even realize we have those cycles. We don't even realize we have those patterns. And that's not just in relationships. It comes up with money. Right. So if you have a poverty mindset, 9 times out of 10, that is a cycle or belief that's coming from, the family in which you grew up in. Whether that's your grandma, whether that's, your aunts and uncles, right? I know people in my family, a couple people a little cheap. I ain't even going out here and lie. And when they say, oh, I can't afford that, like, to me, that makes me cringe a little bit, just because I know how conscious I am, because I've done a lot of work on that particular area. Now, do they know that? No. Do you know that? Yeah, I just told you. But they don't know that. But when I hear that kind of stuff, I'm like, oh, like, because in the past, I might have fed into it, right? Or what are they teaching their children? Again, it becomes a cycle. So we got relationships, we got money. We also have, obviously our health and our body. So obviously you're inheriting your body. You can't control that. You inherit, your body parts, the way you look and all that from families. That's something you can't control. But you can control, if diabetes runs in your family and you're eating all willy-nilly, then obviously it's inevitable that you are putting yourself at risk for a cycle or pattern that can obviously show up for you in your life if you're obviously not taking care of yourself or taking care of your body. So that's why that's important for the health level, right? For you to even know, what does run in your family on both sides. And if you don't know, then that's something important that you need to ask, because as a woman, when you are going through a process of healing, evolving, and growing, you have a responsibility now, right? And you have a responsibility to all the generations to come, because you can be the one person who is breaking those chains, who's breaking those barriers. And obviously, whenever you're the first of anything, it's a challenge, it's hard, but you make it easier for your daughter or for your granddaughter, for your great granddaughter, for those to come, right? To make that shift or to even be born into a new reality, because you shift, the money mindset for, generations to come in your family, or you shifted, something related to health, or you shifted something related to, career and purpose, that no one else has been able to do in your family. Right. And again, like I said, being the first of anything can be a challenge, because it's going to be new. It's going to be different. It's going to go against the norm. But, I'm here to work with women who are in that space and place, who they want to, they want to shatter. They want to break the cycles, right? They want to let go of the unhealthy stuff that is in their way, whether it's with their health or it's with their finances or it's with their relationships. You could also be the one. And I know, my newest coach always talks about how she's able to shift and change the relationship dynamics of generations to come in her family, because she chose to go through, preparing for marriage in a whole different way. And she has an entirely different relationship than everybody around her and her family. But she wanted to change. And even though she has a very healthy and loving marriage that she's even built an entire business around, she says how people in her family still are like, it ain't gonna last, or oh, that's only gonna last a year, or he's gonna eventually get on your nerves, or like they're still saying things to her that are negative, just because it's something new, it's something they're not used to, it's something that they just haven't been around, right? But again, people get stuck in their patterns. I was out yesterday with somebody, and we were sitting and we were eating, and out of nowhere, I don't know what we're talking about, but she just comes out and she just says, you know what? I just want you to know that all men cheat, all men lie. And I was like, pause, because I'm really like, I don't, I don't think that at all. And I don't believe that to be true. Have I ever been cheated on? Absolutely. But I do not believe all men cheat and all men lie. But again, that's her experience, because that is the cycle and pattern that she's constantly in, which is crazy because she's way older than me, old enough to be my mom, right? But again, it doesn't matter what your age is if you have those certain beliefs that you have implanted, right? Which is what we've been talking about. If you've been, watching my last couple of videos, I've been talking about how we implant things in our mind, and it becomes a cycle. And if you have joined the Spring Clean Your Life Challenge, tomorrow we are going to be talking about that in our very first day, how the thoughts that we have in our minds, how they manifest and blossom into things that we don't even really truly desire. But because we're so stuck in the cycles and the patterns of things, and we're so deeply rooted, right? It's almost like the roots are attached to the ground. And in order for you to release them and to let them go and break the cycles, you got to learn how to cut those things off, right? So let's get into how you can begin the process of breaking, the cycle or breaking the unhealthy patterns that you have. Again, whether it's coming from generational stuff that you know about or that you don't know about. Some stuff you don't even realize why you keep ending up, in a certain situation over and over again. Sometimes you don't even recognize, where it's coming from, because we're not always communicating or having those conversations, or we don't always think it's important to have the ins and outs of, your parents' upbringing or your grandparents' upbringing, or what it was it really like to live, at your grandparents' house, right? And you don't even realize those things, again, that are both negative and positive, right? Because they're both very important to know. So here's the first thing that you can do that will allow you to begin the process of breaking cycles and patterns. Is, first of all, you got to figure out what they are. What are the cycles and patterns that you're in? And in particular, is way easier to look at the areas of your life. She said you're preaching. To look at the areas of your life that are not where you want them to be. So if relationships is a struggle for you, or you're in a place of discontentment, like, God, where's my husband? Why hasn't he shown up? Why do I got to do all this work on myself? Because I see other people out here married. They ain't doing no work, but I'm over here waiting. If you find yourself in that cycle or pattern, then that's where you need to begin. That's where you need to start. Right? Is it something to do with your body and eating, right? Because I know that's also an unhealthy cycle or pattern that I found myself in multiple times. And most of you guys know my story in terms of gaining my 60 pounds, losing my 60 pounds, gaining it back, losing it again. Back and forth. What is that? That is still an unhealthy cycle or pattern. And I know most of you have probably seen my before and after. If not, you can probably find it in my Facebook group. If you scroll through, I'm sure you can find my before and after. But again, unhealthy cycle or pattern, but you first need to identify what it is. Because the first step of healing anything is acknowledging that I feel this particular way. Or as of right now, like I said, the person I was with yesterday, she literally came out and said, all men cheat, right? And when you say stuff, you're speaking what's on your heart. Right? That was already in her head. That was already in her heart. That's what she believes. And as a result of that, because I know a lot about her relationships, she attracts let me tell you, she attracts the craziest relationships, the same person. Always attracting somebody's husband and entertains it, always, right? But again, that's because the beliefs she brings to the table match up to that, right? That's what it matches up to, right? So again, that you need to change something when it's repeating itself over and over again, or you're not liking that area of your life. If you're like, damn, I wish my money could be here, or I wish I could go and travel, but I can't because of this. If you're making excuses, right? If you're making excuses, if it's an unhealthy pattern that you find yourself in, or if it's something that you don't really like to talk about with other people, right? As I was watching Ayanla, one of the brothers, you could tell it's almost like because the father wasn't there, that it's almost like he felt as though he had to take on all of the other brothers. And when one of them was murdered, one of them was molested, he left one of them behind. He almost took on all the guilt and the burden of it. But when Ayanla would ask him a question, he didn't want to speak it to her and literally say, I feel guilty, or I feel this, or, I feel that. He didn't want to say it, but he felt it. And how many times, do we do that, right? Everybody is different, but a lot of times we keep it all inside of here. And then it comes out as anger. It comes out as us, yelling at people. It comes out of us, overgeneralizing. Like I said, the person I was with yesterday saying that all men lie or all men cheat, right? It comes out in other little nasty ways or behaviors that we have, because we have this cycle or we have this pattern, and we obviously can't change it until we're ready to. We can't change it until we're ready to change it. So even if somebody else notices and they're like, oh, you got a nasty attitude, you need to change that. If you're not ready to change that, it's not going to change. The same is true if somebody comes to you and says, I saw your man and, he was cheating, right? But if you're not ready to leave yet, you're not going to leave, right? You might end up staying there a little while longer until you feel that it's time for you to move on, right? Does that mean that you're dumb or you're stupid? Hell no. Okay. Because other people have done it. I've done it before. Right. I don't do that shit now, but I'm saying I have in the past. So who am I to judge? Just like, who are you to judge? Right. But when you're ready, you will know it's time. You will know it's ready to break a pattern. When it's bothering you, to the point where it's interfering with you getting married, it's interfering with that weight loss, it's interfering with that purpose, that career, it's interfering with your money, you will know it's time to break it, right? But first you need to identify it, right? You need to acknowledge it, right? So you cannot heal, what you don't speak, right? You can't heal what you don't speak, and what you are afraid. Or here's a better way of saying it, right? And I got this from Ayanla Van Zant, but you cannot, fix what you don't want to face. So if you're not willing to come face to face with it, don't acknowledge it. Keep it in there, right? Which is not good or healthy at all. Because the second step, once you acknowledge and you identify with it, is the painful part. And that's actually sitting in it. And I mean, sitting in the pain of, what it is, going back to, whatever moments you can, right? Where you remember first experiencing this thing, or where you have identified it from. It's really sitting in the pain of, of the guilt. So for example, when Ayanla was talking to the one brother who he finally admitted he was guilty, he felt guilty that he had ran away from one of the foster homes and he left some of the other brothers behind, right? And not even knowing, and he wasn't aware that they, were molested or that they were harmed. He thought that they would be okay, because when he was there, they were okay. But when he left, they weren't okay. So he had to admit that, right? And when he admitted it, right, she automatically said to him, now stop. And now I need you to sit in it. I need you to actually feel it, right? So the only way to heal something, right, is to deal with those emotions in the moment, whether it's guilt, whether it's shame, whether it's sadness, whether it is anger, whether it is blame. My dad wasn't there, right? That's an example. My dad wasn't there. What does that feel like, right? Because if you're not feeling it, you're not going through the process. You have to, feelings, right? They're not facts. It's just an emotion. You need to let it go through you. But you have to sit in that pain, or even if it's, you're just discontent with, your husband arriving, or even if you're in a relationship and you're tired of waiting, for him to propose, it's the same thing. Sit in that pain and cry and let it out, and even say, God, like, I'm so frustrated. I'm so tired, right? You don't have to be the superwoman all the time, or you don't have to uphold, such great esteem all the time, right? So it is one thing to be a confident and powerful woman. Absolutely. I'm all for that, right? But at the same token, when do you have the time to really sit in that pain and really actually feel it, so it can kind of go through you instead of you carrying it? That allows you, man, all hearts, that's fine, right? Instead of you carrying it around in a negative way, everywhere you go. And I always say, you get what you emit out to the rest of the world. So if you're carrying, pain from when you were 6, or you're carrying, I don't know, you're carrying the extra weight around all the time. You're carrying the frustration that you're not married yet. You're carrying that all around. That's not sexy. That's not cute, right? And again, you are going to attract things to you that are going to reinforce that, right? So again, the first thing you need to do is you need to acknowledge it. Then you need to sit in the pain, the shame, the blame, the guilt, the anger, the rage. I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's rage, and get up and smack a wall, or right, go to a kickboxing class. Find a way to release it from you, which is my third thing. Is once you have acknowledged it and you've actually sat in it, then it's time for you to release it. It's time for you to say, I acknowledge, that this was a part of my story. This is a part of who I am. I acknowledge that obviously God wouldn't give me something I could not handle, or that's something that didn't have a purpose attached to it. Sorry, right? So acknowledge it, right? Sit in it, and then you know what? Say, I'm ready to release this. I'm ready to let it go. I'm ready to come out of agreement with this, right? Because I have been in it for so long, and sometimes when you're in it for so long, it does become normal because you can't see a different way. But right, the third step is always going to be releasing it and letting it go, which means you need a mindset shift, which is what we're going to cover tomorrow, actually, during the first day of the Spring Clean Your Life Challenge, right? And then the releasing process, again, that might be you continuing to cry. That might be you journaling through the releasing. That might mean you need to get a therapist or a counselor, somebody who is unbiased that you can talk to and just share your feelings, and they don't know nothing about you. Maybe you need to get a coach where you can have those conversations and they can push you to continue on your journey, right? So that's where the releasing part, kind of comes in through this process, right? And releasing could also be, so say, obviously, once you go through the acknowledging, you kind of sit in, the pain of this is where I am and this is how I ended up here in this space. Releasing could also be you taking action. So if, something is dealing with your health and your body, for you, you're releasing, once you go through that process, could be you like physically releasing the weight because you no longer need it, because you come out of agreement with the fact that you need to carry it. I don't need to carry this any longer. Because I don't need it to protect me. I don't need it around me to secure me or to hide me from the rest of the world. I'm ready to be vulnerable. I'm ready to be open. And again, I'm getting to that on a spiritual level, in terms of your weight, right, and your body, right? So anyway, releasing could be you taking action, right? It could be you physically letting the weight go. So that could be you detoxing. That could be you exercising as you go through that process. Now, here's the thing. Just because you exercise or detox once doesn't mean you might not have to do it again, right? A lot of times I think we think it's a one and a done, but the healing process, the evolving process, the growth process doesn't mean it's one and done, right? And that's why the last part of this is repeating it all over again. Because you're going to go through this process, you're going to acknowledge it, you're going to sit in it, you're going to release a little bit, and then it's going to be a couple days, a couple weeks, and a month, and then something's going to happen that is going to trigger you or remind you of who you used to be, right? And depending on where you are in your healing and development, you might have to go through this process all over again. If somebody says, one thing, right? So say you are, very discontent about, not being married yet, and you've went through this process, you've released stuff, you're happy, you're living your life, you're like, okay, I'm waiting, but I'm happy. And then somebody comes up to you and says, well, why aren't you married yet? Ding, ding, ding. That could be your trigger, right? That can be your trigger right then and there, right? Then it's like, what do you do, right? You might have to go back through this process depending on how it feels in your spirit. If you feel bothered by it, then that means that there's something you need to acknowledge. And you acknowledge it by journaling or spending time with yourself or God and say, I recognize that earlier I really felt bothered by what so-and-so said to me. I thought I had released it, but maybe there's something deeper. Maybe there's another layer to this, right? We have so many layers on top of which we kind of put around ourselves, or our mindset, or our beliefs, or even our heart. There's so many layers there. So you need to acknowledge it. You need to sit in it and say, I felt so bothered and uncomfortable with this today. And then go through the process of releasing it again, right? Until you get to the space and the place where somebody says something and you're unbothered, you're unapologetic. Like, girl, I'm good. He will show up when he needs to show up. God got it, right? I'm not worried about it, right? But actually mean it. Because you can say a lot of stuff, but actually mean it, and you're not unbothered by it, right? So when you get to that phase and space, then you know that it has been completely healed. But sometimes, even when you have, an open wound, or when you get surgery, it can take a number of weeks to fully heal, or take a number of times to fully recover. Just like an athlete, if he gets hurt while he's playing basketball and he tears his ACL or something, he might be out for what? The whole season. Why? Because he might be recovering. Once he, recovers, then he might have to go through physical therapy in order for him to get back out into it for the next season, right? Because he obviously still has work to do. There's still healing to do. Even though he might have had 2 weeks of healing, okay, he might need 3 more weeks or 4 more weeks. Or they might discover something when he goes back to the doctor's appointment. Maybe it's not healing the way it should. The same is true on the physical level, on a spiritual, mental, and emotional level, in terms of breaking patterns and breaking cycles, right? Because I know I had emailed a client back today who was saying, well, I did some forgiveness work, and it was really hard. Like, I don't know. And I'm like, you got to do it again, right? You got to do it over again, right? So acknowledge it, sit in it, release it, then repeat it until you are unbothered by it, right? That's how you will know when the same shit pops off and you have a totally different response, or a totally different reaction, or you feel different. You will know. You will know. That's why it's super important to journal and to journal your journey, because the beauty of it is it allows you to go back and to see how far you've evolved and how far you have come. Because it'll be 5 years out, you go back and read it and get to hear what you were thinking and where you were. You get to see your growth and your evolution, because sometimes when you're living and breathing and in it, you don't always realize just how much you have grown, or how much you have shifted or changed, or how close you are to the thing you desire, because it might not be there yet, but you don't even realize all of the work, time, and energy you've already put in, right? All the shifts you've already made to breaking a cycle, or breaking a pattern, or positioning yourself for something new. So it's super important to ensure you go back and look at your journey, see where you are, and see where you want to go. Okay. All right. So I hope that you have found this video to be helpful in terms of breaking cycles and breaking patterns. If you are interested in doing some more of this work, then I highly encourage you, if you have not already, to sign up for the Spring Clean Your Life Challenge. As we're entering spring, it is time that we break these things, right? And again, it all starts with mindset, which is all of what we're going to be working on in our first day, which is all about shedding the layers, right, that we kind of find ourselves in terms of the cycles we're in, the patterns we're in, the mindset that we have. Because if you can shift your mindset and you can undo and unbind yourself from the cycles and patterns you find yourself in, then it opens up so many new doors, so many new possibilities, and so many new opportunities for you to attract what you really want, versus what you're settling for, or versus what the little girl in you wants, right, that hasn't fully healed and evolved, because she's still stuck at, maybe 8 years old and still waiting for her dad to show up, right? But instead, if you can break that cycle or pattern, it positions you better to attract the love and relationships that you want, to attract the kind of money that you want, to get the kind of body that you want, to get the kind of life that you desire. But you got to learn how to break the cycles and the patterns. So spring cleaning your life is all about you, focusing on your head, your heart, and your home. So the space that you live in, right, your body, you live in that, your home, you live in that, it needs to be tight, right, and in order, right? You also need to get that heart space together, because a lot of us are holding on to soul ties and toxic ties and lies and just all kind of stuff. And people have guarded hearts, and closed off hearts, and they wondering why ain't nobody showing up. But you all the way closed off, like, oh, he about to hurt me again, right? And then also, obviously, we're starting with the head, right? We're starting with the head and the mindset and the shifts that we have to make, and breaking the chains is so important, right? So again, acknowledge it, sit in it, release it, then repeat it until you're no longer bothered by it or worried about it, or it's impacting, or you're still attracting it to you in your life. You'll see the work that you're doing on the inside. You will see based on what's manifesting for you on the outside. You will know what you actually think and what patterns you're in. And obviously you can always get into healthy patterns and good patterns, but you have to want to make those shifts. You have to want to make those changes, and then you have to go through the process. Now, I ain't telling you the process is going to be easy, but it will be good, and it will be necessary, and you will get the benefits if you keep going through the process. You will never ever get the promise that God has for you if you ain't willing to go through the process. And what we were talking about here today is about you going through the process so that you can get to the promise, right? So hopefully that makes sense. So again, if you go to bit.ly/fiercespring, you will have the opportunity to sign up and to join us for our next challenge. So as always, I'm Tara Pritchett, Confidence Coach for Women. Find me on Instagram at Unleash Fierce. Find me on YouTube at Unleash Fierce. Find me on Facebook, facebook.com/Unleash Fierce, so that you can follow me for daily inspiration and motivation. I hope that you have enjoyed this. Now it's time to go and break. I think this is Wakanda, right? So wrong. It's time for us to break, right? Break the chains and the cycles and the unhealthy patterns that we find ourselves in, so that we can live and we can be free and we can be content. We can be happy and at peace with ourselves, but also be at peace with God, right? That's a whole different video. That's going to be a whole different video. And April, thank you for recounting the points. I do appreciate that, and have a good night.